Welcome everybody to another Tuesday edition of kind of the KIS Organics Q&A. And I am Chad Westport. I am from Twin Peaks Cannabis, and I fill in once a month on the show. And it's usually with Tad. But today we've got my brother. He's equally as rad. What's up, Brandon? How you doing?
Rhyming. I'm not ready for rhyming today. You caught me off guard. Yeah, no rap battle today. But yeah, I'm good, bro. Good to see you. Always a pleasure, man. Um, yeah,
I,
yeah. How's
I
things?
things are going good, and I only have one line, so I'm glad you're not ready for a rap battle. I'm glad you didn't come back at me because I rehearsed that for like hours in the mirror. So
Okay,
hopefully,
yeah,
chat, you
yeah.
guys will let me know how was my delivery.
Right. How's this flow? Yeah, I think I could write pretty good, but freestyle, I'm horrible. I'm just horrible. So yeah, yeah. I'll claim
Yeah,
it. I suck.
uh, don't ask me to rap. Although I do appreciate Chonky Nugs. Chad has bars. So
Nice,
let's
nice.
let's get into it. This is the Tuesday Q&A. We
Mhm.
want questions from the chat. So guys, if you have
Exactly.
questions, try to put like cap letters question in front of it, and I will try to see it and I will bring it up. But we always kind of have one to start off with, and I have one for you today
Okay.
because I'm getting ready to amend all of the Westport blend that I've been using for over the last
Awesome.
year. I've got a few big garbage cans, and I'm going to amend that. Um, I amend it using the nutrient pack. So from KIS Organics, there is the nutrient pack on there, and it's very easy. It gives you directions about how much proportion wise. But it's also easier to ship than soil. So that's something that I may be looking into is maybe just kind of a Westport blend nutrient pack that people can use their own soil. People can kind of put um, the nutrients we have in our soil at KIS Organics in the Westport blend. You guys could use that in your media of choice. So what where that conversation led with Tad though is that there may be a larger margin of error because again, when it's all in the soil, you guys formulate it to a T, it's perfect, ready to go out of the bag. But amending, it does involve people and measuring and all that. But I also kind of have always heard and always wondered, it's like with these organic top amendments, you can't really burn the plants unless you dump a pound on when it calls for an ounce. Now, is there some truth to that? And are there any like hidden dangers we should look out for with
Yes.
amending and
Yeah.
measuring?
Always. Always. Yeah. So yeah, always measure twice, cut once. Um
Yes.
it's always heartbreaking. There was a young guy who reached out this past week. He got some fish meal or something, and I think he went like real heavy handed with that in a 7 gallon where I'm usually prescribing, you know, 1 or 2 cups for a yard of soil. And so, disaster ensued. So that can happen. So you can definitely, I've heard lots of people over the years say, oh, you can't burn plants with organics, which
Right.
that's not true. Poison's in the dose. You could,
Yeah.
you can burn anything with anything if you put enough of it in. You can kill a person if they drink too much water, so it
True.
really is poison is the dose. Like there's a doctor that I follow on YouTube, and she always talks about, people are worried and hung up about this thing, this thing, this thing. She's like, the first toxic thing that you're introduced to as a baby is your mother's breast milk. If you drank too much of it, you would die. She's like,
Wow.
number two, water. If you had too much, you will die. And so she really stresses poisons in the dose. So I think that's a really good starting point. The KISS Organics nutrient pack and the Bloom Booster are what we call COFs, complete organic fertilizers. I'm sure a lot of folks here are familiar with Steve Solomon. He talks about complete organic fertilizers. And so a good complete organic fertilizer um, should have some instructions. application rates, and we're splitting the averages. I do the agronomy over at KIS with Dr. Ben and Tad, but I do the majority of it. And there's always a starting point. I'm looking at a test, I'm seeing a starting point, and then I'm going to recommend individual inputs. If you want to get away from testing, save some money, not have that 2 week lag while you're waiting for your sample to get to the lab and then come back to you. I think for a lot of home growers, especially, it's a great way to use these complete organic fertilizers to get back to sufficiency and balance. And so a good complete organic fertilizer should be balanced already. And so that's the first kind of hurdle, because we don't want, like I fight with dolomite and the dolomite folks all the time, because there's like maybe 2%, 4% of folks that should be using dolomite. The rest, it's going to screw up their calcium to magnesium ratio. We want calcium to be king, and if you add dolomite, you'll invert that. And then all of a sudden you've got calcium deficiency issues and you don't know why. So it's important that it be balanced. We have two different products, or I like to call them solutions. The nutrient pack is so that somebody who is reamending, or somebody that needs to top dress mid round, they're seeing a deficiency, they can come in and use this and not throw themselves out of balance. And then our bloom booster is built the same way, but with much lower nitrogen, so that we don't have delays senescence, reduces harvest metric, depletes terpenes. So we don't want excessive nitrates towards the end. So if you see a deficiency, you might want to do something like that. But you can most certainly, if you came in and we recommend 1 cup per 10 gallons of soil on average. And so a home grower could test one time and then maybe like run 2 or 3 times with just a nutrient pack, and then saves them a lot of money, saves them a lot of time, and then test again on that fourth round. And the reason I would recommend testing again is there's certain things that you can't provide with a nutrient pack, and that's pH management. um
Mhm.
we want to see where your pH is, so we know if it's drifting one way or the other, and we can take corrective action. We want to also see some of the bad actors with this style of growing, where we have very little runoff, or you should have very little runoff.
Right.
See, it's even worse for the sip guys, because they never have intrusion from the top. You
Mhm.
can build up high sodium, high chlorides, and those create antagonisms, and those will outcompete. So sodium will outcompete your productive cations, calcium, magnesium, potassium. um, your chlorides are going to block nitrates, other things. And so we want to manage those so that they stay at a certain level. And so I think a complete organic fertilizer, a nutrient pack, is a wonderful way to go. Now, if you did over apply, and this is something I know that you and Tad have talked about, um, chances are you're not going to see, typical, like what we see with the over fertilized ionic plant, where you see a lot of
Like a tip
necrosis.
burn or something. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of the tip burn, just as a side note, a lot of the tip burn that we see in organic production at the top of the plant, I get these emails all the time, like way too much nitrogen, way too much nitrogen. And I'm like, that's a trace element, most likely. It's at the top of the plant. We have a dichotomous key on the KISS website, kind of coaches folks through, like, where did the plant start showing the problem. It's mobile if it showed at the bottom, it's immobile if it starts at the top. And so a lot of times folks, if they go through that dichotomous key, they'll get a much better understanding of how those nutrients display and where and that kind of stuff, so you kind of get you out of some of those problems. But no, I did a lot of verbal diarrhea there. I think I answered the question. I don't know.
You did, because again, we've always, well, we've been told that you can't burn your plants with organic ingredients. It's
Go
true,
go put
actually,
a
yes,
bunch
you
of chicken
can.
shit. Go put a bunch of chicken shit on a plant and call me tomorrow if it's still alive, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
and that's the kind of the hot and the cold difference between a hot manure and like cold manure, and that's a big mistake. Again, sometimes you have to compost these things. Sometimes you have to let it settle in for a few weeks, just kind of cool down as far as your mix goes. But the top dress amendments, like the nutrient pack, that would be considered cold. You can put that straight
yeah.
on your crops. You're not going to
Well,
worry
I
about
I will
worrying about
say, y- I, so one, back to the manures. That's why I love rabbit poop
that. Hmm.
because it's cold. Um, so when you add a nutrient pack, the thing that I'm thinking about the most is the nitrogen. And so
Okay.
if you over apply nitrogen, what's going to happen is you can get a increase in physical temperature, which could obviously fry fragile, root tips. And then the other thing is if you over apply nitrogen, and you're obviously applying a lot of other stuff too, but if you over apply nitrogen and you slide into the nitrogen cycle, nitrate, nitrate, I'm sorry, nitrite, nitrate, ammonium, ammonification, so ammonia. And so, I have seen people apply like a ton of alfalfa, soybean, and feather to a bed, four times what they're supposed to put in there, and it kills all their plants. And what's happened is they literally created ammonia in their bed. Or
Mm.
they sent the temperatures through the roof because there's so much biological action. So when I amend between rounds, I always think it's really important to turn the soil really well. I'm
Mhm.
well known for not being into stratification and that kind of stuff for a bunch of different reasons. But
The no-till gardening?
yeah, I like to
Okay,
turn my soil,
okay.
um, because if it stays at its stable temperature, we know that it's safe to plant in. And then back to the no-till thing, I watched this really interesting thing because Tad and I we have access to data that demonstrates that tilling actually sends your biology diversity and numbers up versus no-till. And I just saw this really interesting thing. Think it's in somewhere in Mexico, but they've brought in buffalo, which, in my head, I think compaction when I hear buffalo, but to restore dead prairie land. And they're bringing in
Yeah.
buffalo. Buffalo aren't lazy like cows, and so they don't stay in the same place. And so they're dropping manure, they're actually breaking up the soil. And then when they come back, the prairie dogs come back. When the prairie dogs come back and start tilling the soil actively, all the grasses come back and all the biology came back. So it's really, really cool, really interesting, and not what some of the folks are out there saying. And here's real scientific data that's, a real world, case study. And it's really cool. It's really interesting. So yeah, turn your soil, but don't compact it.
There you go. The soil structure is a very important aspect of it, and that's something
Crucial.
that we run into as we reuse the soils, as we continually amend the soils. We're worried about that compaction over time. And yeah, Tad, when I was talking with him, because again, I'm going to be amending all the soil here very shortly, and he's like, yeah, it's you got about 4 or 5 times in it before you start testing, because then you look for more of imbalances. And as you were saying, if somebody dumps a whole bunch of different meals on there, there goes the pipe. You can disrupt the balance of things. So that's what we're all about. Um, I was gonna dive into like chelation versus balance and how to get some things in there, but we've got some great questions already,
Okay.
kind of from chat that we can hit.
Yeah.
Uh,
Chelation, just get some worms or some humic or fulvic acid in there, but it really makes a huge difference, especially in your trace elements and solution your moisture level has a ton to do with that as well. Like I'm going to tell on myself.
Yeah.
So I just I've got way too much going on. Part of it is I'm enjoying myself. I'm out doing a lot of hiking and stuff, and I skipped a watering that I should not have skipped, and my plants kind of look a little ratty on top right now because I didn't have enough solution. Those trace elements weren't available because of that. All I had to do was water to get them to come back. They're in the bed. I just let my plants get a little too dry. And so they didn't even look wilty, but they're showing a nutrient deficiency because I was lazy and messed up. So I'm telling myself.
Good for you, because that actually reminded me that the one thing that I did want to touch on before we do move on with that was that you could cause if you add too much like organic ingredients, or if you go overboard, you can start to cause osmotic pressure uh, in the soil, and that's a hard one to diagnose because it just you get signs of other things going on and you try to solve it as that. And the whole watering thing for people can be trickier than it is at face value. So can you maybe just kind of expand on like osmotic pressure and how that would affect the plant if I added again 2 pounds instead of 2 ounces of this nutrient pack?
Yeah, yeah. So osmotic pressure, we talk about osmotic pressure and osmotic stress. Basically,
Yeah.
the fertility, once it's available, once it's in an ionic form that's available to the plant, um, wants to wants to move in one direction, which is into the plant. If we overload the soil, then it starts to work in reverse. And so for the plant to pull in both water and ions, and I actually owe Tad a video. I told him I've got a white.
Oh, he hit the wrong button. Brandon is famous for his whiteboard. I actually had him on a few years ago on the Just One Thing series that I was doing, where I would get people from around the industry talk for 10 to 15 minutes about the one thing they think growers should know the most. And we talked about kind of perched water tables and layering soil. But Brandon is back now. You can finish that thought there if you like.
Yeah, sorry, man. I've got I live on in paradise, but I've got horrible internet because of it. And so yeah, so essentially nutrients normally will flow into the plant. If you put the concentration too high out in the substrate, then you start to reverse that. And so there's an energy expenditure for to get water and nutrients into the plant. And so it could be as subtle as a hidden harvest metric change. You
Mhm.
lost a gram per watt this round, or something like that. It's kind of basically invisible, and you would really have a hard time figuring out where it went. Or it can be as extreme as you know necrotic plants, especially on top. One weird thing I've seen with incredibly high osmotic stress. Um, I had a soil report years ago, and I don't even know how I did it, but my sulfur levels on my paste were maybe 1200. I'm looking in the 60s. That's where I'm looking for. And so off the scale, the plants
Yeah.
fin the plants, like, it was primo smoke. It was some motor breath cuts from Masonic. And
I love that. Was it extra
yeah,
terpy? Because we all hear about sulfur contributing to
it
that.
was super terpy, but
Oh,
but something that I noticed on the plants was
that's what I was trying.
I was getting.
Save the terps.
Nice,
Save the
yeah.
terps.
Respect the
Respect the
terps.
terps.
So,
Sorry.
no, it was really cool. I was seeing something that's kind of similar to guttation. And I think most folks know
Okay.
what that is, but guttation is where along the margin, the edge of a leaf, if a plant has high osmotic pressure, and it's overwatered usually, you can get little drops of water that's getting physically pushed out. It's not coming out the stomata, it's coming out the edges of the plant. And so it's I was seeing that on, and it is coming out stomata, but not the ones that we think of. So let me correct that.
Right.
But I was seeing what we call grape pearls. And so if this is the main stem, I would get these little, like, almost like
Balls.
you can pop them. They're not, it's not water, it's not just a water droplet, it's an actual little thing that you can pop, like a little grape, and it's because of osmotic stress. And so that would be like a really far out example of like how extreme it can be with like incredibly high osmotic stress. Now, I'll say I did not get the harvest that I did the next round with the motor breath once I, cleaned my soil out. Um, so, I definitely, lost some harvest. Depends on the genetics a lot. There's certain genetics that, were in that bed that just kept right on keeping on. That motor breath did not like it. Um, and so it just comes down to the genetics too, because
Yeah.
you could
Yep.
have one plant that can tolerate it. There's certain cultivars that seem to tolerate chlorides way better than some.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
another important thing. But yeah, osmotic stress, it does, it's a real toll on your plant. It's literally just it's a tax that your plant's having to pay to get. We already got to go through the middlemen with the microbes, and now your plant has to pay to get its ions into it, and rather than just they just gratefully accepting them for free.
Right. And as home growers, we love to freak out at the slightest sign of something. And again, the dichotomous key, it just for me, signal flow, start in the middle. Is it above? Is it below? Maybe mobile, maybe not mobile. It's a great place to start looking. But yeah, we like to freak out. And that isn't one that you're necessarily gonna see or know to solve because you're dealing with the decoys. But you did mention sulfur there though, real quick. I wanted to put this question up here. Let me see if I can make it better. I always like it with the bubble view. Bubbles make it easier to read. Okay. Mr. Rourke 420 though, he says I'm using sulfur powder between rounds, post russets. Thought on a mustard meal top dress as a second round of cleanup of the mites. Now, you're saying yes. I will let you expand and then I will ask my question because I've heard stuff about mustard meal.
Okay,
Hit
so
it.
I just happen to have I spent some time with let me do a little name dropping, Colin Bletsky from Musgrow. And
Okay.
the reason this came out or came about was I had a KISS customer reach out. They've got an issue with symphyalins, and it's not something that most cannabis growers know because it's an outdoor pest. If you're a potato grower, you'd know it, and
Okay. Okay.
it's these actually kind of large semi-transparent white centipede looking things, and they'll
Hmm.
decimate outdoor row crops, cannabis, tomatoes,
Oh wow.
potatoes, whatever. um they're really bad, and there's not any any really good organic options for them. And so I have a friend who's an entomologist who I reached out to, and he said, "I got a guy for you. He's like, "I want to do some trials. Let's talk to your customer." And so they have a mustard based product. It's two different types of mustard, and I know that Tad is not a huge fan. And the reason is that it's a pretty nuclear option. Um,
Okay.
but if you had symphyalins, if you had root aphids, if you had outdoor like flea beetles, and so outdoor, this would be kind of doing this to get rid of them for next year kind of situation. But if you
Okay.
had like fusarium or even phytophthora in a bed, that's pretty devastating. You could nuke that bed with this mustard meal, and it's like the high rate I think is 200 pounds per acre. I have to do the math to figure out the grams per gallon of soil in a bed, but I could do that pretty quickly. Um, and so it forms, what is it? It's allele isothiocyanate, I think. Don't yeah, don't take me to
Doesn't even
task if
fit
I
on a Scrabble board. Doesn't
yeah,
even
yeah,
fit on a Scrabble board.
right.
Yeah.
But you put this dry powder in, you add
Mhm.
water, and it releases this allele isothiocyanate. It's essentially like a gas that will kill everything. And so at that point, you would have to re-inoculate all the good stuff. And so if you were outdoors, you'd want to bring in a bunch of compost. If you were indoors, you would want to add aerated compost teas, maybe some compost, unless that's how you got your phytophthora in the first place. Or, maybe you could do some trichoderma, some other things just to get some biology going in your soil. Um, but so it's the nuclear option. So it's not my first go-to.
Right,
But
right.
but if somebody was up against something really tough like root aphids, it might be the way to go for them, because they could, between rounds, they could just obliterate the soil. Then they could come in 48 hours later with like some Bovaria, and like the
Right.
granular Bovarias, and leave that in the soil. And then theoretically they might be able to get away with that. So I love sulfur for russets. I'll do a little plug for Epishield.
Yeah,
Um,
please let me blow
yeah,
that up here so I
yeah.
can.
So
Oh, sample only, but EpiShield from Bioworks. Okay.
yeah, and so I've been preaching that Sufoil X is my desert island IPM product for over a decade now. And yeah, I'll come talk to you on Saturday morning about Sufoil if you'll let me. If you won't, I'll leave some brochures. And so and I don't work for them. It's just a great product. This, however, came to us from Suzanne Wainwright Evans, the bug lady.
Nice. Yep.
She's the gold standard for all things integrated pest management. Bugs in cannabis. She really is the gold standard. And so the cool things about the EpiShield is that it's 53% higher mortality rates, 10 times less application rate. There's a 0 hour reentry interval. There's a 0 hour pre-harvest interval. It doesn't have ammonia in it to stabilize it. It smells great. It's just peppermint and clove oil,
Well, that's one
with
thing
some
though that
soap.
I did read. I did just read in the KIS Organic newsletter. I subscribe to that. It comes to my inbox every month.
Thank you.
And I did just see the announcement on that, and it did say spray right up to harvest.
And so
I always question that though,
I
because
always
when you
question
say
that.
that, does it spray
So
on the buds? Like
I
actually
would
physically
never
spray the buds?
spray. I would never spray a flowering plant past week 2 at the very latest.
Yeah, I'm with you
Once I
there.
hit yeah. So when I say 0 hour PHI, uh, that would be for tomatoes or anything
Okay,
else
okay,
in your
fair.
garden. Yeah, yeah. So
Something you're not
I should put
combusting.
the qualifier on there that yeah.
Okay,
I
fair
wouldn't
enough.
spray. I just seconds before we jumped on here, I was on a call with a really wonderful dude, a old friend of mine from college days, and we spent you know good time sitting around passing pipes, back in the day. And so he's a really great friend of mine, and good dude. And we were talking about um different sprays and that kind of stuff. I try to kill plants with stuff if it's a new product.
Me
And
too.
so, so this is they recommend the high end is 3.5 milliliters per gallon. So
Mhm.
I tried it at 10 mils per gallon. They said don't do it over 90 degrees or 90% relative humidity. So I went in the seed shed and it was 100 degrees and I just let it rip. And those plants look phenomenal today. So
That's
that
awesome.
makes me feel really good, because you and I both know, everybody here knows, there's going to be operator error. It's the telephone game. Oh yeah, Brandon told me 3.5. Oh yeah, I remember he said 5. Yeah, Brandon told me 5. Yeah, Brandon told me 5.3. Next thing you know, it's Brandon told me 35. I've got dyslexia. And so, so things happen. So I like to just
It
kind of
does.
push the limits a little bit just to try to save growers some heartache. I did hear from a buddy of mine, um, works for another company that offers EpiShield, and he said that he did have a grower use EpiShield the day after he used spinosad in a hot greenhouse, and he got some phytotoxicity. So
Okay.
it's not sitting
Now,
around. I would pick. I've got a little thing of spinosad, some what is it, Jack's dead bug or something like that.
okay.
I'm gonna go out there and spray them and see what happens. That's
Use a test sample. Only spray a small portion of your carpet before applying, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You gotta do that.
Spray in your closet so that you don't ruin your bedroom floor. That's always
Yeah.
smart. Always do a test spray. I'm infamously bad at that. I'm like, okay, let's hit the
You just
I want
go
to hit the
for it.
whole room. Yeah, I go for it usually. But that's not a good practice. And I go for it because I've been doing this for 40 years and I've got a pretty educated guess on what's gonna happen. Um,
Abs- Absolutely. And when it comes to, I mean, again, our brains are working in a similar method there because you tell me not to do something, that means I want to do it at twice the strength. So, and we do this
right.
for other people's benefit. So, a lot of time it's like, do as I say, not as I do. Because I did put out a video, and actually, you helped me with the video. I don't know, maybe 6 months ago or so, but I was trying to burn my plants, spraying different things and leaving the lights on because we're always told, gotta spray with the lights off, have to spray with the lights off. But turns out some things are more beneficial to have the lights on. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
that's the thing
that,
about
that was the
oils.
video.
You would not want it. It's like you don't spray this when you've got 90% relative humidity. You wouldn't want to spray Suffoil or Monterey with real high humidity on an overcast day because if the oil doesn't dry fast enough, you'll get phytotoxicity. And that's counterintuitive because most of us have fried a plant with soap in the middle of the day.
Mhm.
I've definitely done it, especially in the veggie
It's
garden.
possible. It's
Yeah,
possible.
yeah, you can kill a plant.
Yeah,
You
definitely. And I for that video was just using like the common things. Like one of them was like a trifecta suffocant, kill some insects. But again, being an oil, yeah, it
that's
turned out fine.
another cool thing about this is that it's got multiple MOAs, modes of action, which
Mhm.
means less opportunity for resistance, which is important. I said something jokingly to Suzanne, the bug lady, one time about, one of the reasons I love suff oil is it's really hard to build resistance to suffocation. And she started laughing, and I was like, oh, no, 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 no. And she was like, yep. And so there's a type of scale. I can't remember. It's a long time. This is a couple years ago, but there's a type of scale that is built has evolved to have some sort of resistance to suffocation. I don't know if they can hold their breath longer or they found some way to
Little
breathe some other.
snork.
Yeah, little snorkel comes up, or I don't know how they do it, but like and the cool thing for a nerd, but not great for growers about insects is that insects reproduce so quickly and have
Mhm.
such large populations that you can watch evolutionary traits like boom, boom, boom. It's not like humans where I'll be dead before like they're saying our pinky toes are going to go away. You won't see that in a lifetime. That's going to be
Right.
something that's going to happen over thousands and thousands of years. With bugs, they could lose a pinky toe over 2 generations because it's so fast and there's so many of them, And so, I'm exaggerating 2 generations, but you could get thousands of generations in a year as opposed to one generation every 10 years. So it's
It,
it's
it
uh fun
yeah,
research.
it reinforces, multiple modes of action. Don't just rely on one thing, have at least two, ideally three. But if you really are up against something, just doing one thing isn't gonna typically fully work. And longevity wise, no, they'll adapt as you were saying there.
I got a buddy in South Dakota right now who's got multiple insect species in his grow. And so he's tank mixing oil because he's in veg, luckily,
Mhm.
So he's
Uh-oh. He's dropping out, guys. We'll see if the internet pops back on for Brandon. Hopefully it does. But there were a few questions in here that were kind of specific to me, and I can go ahead and answer those right now. Let me get to the bubbles here. Darkwater Herbs asks, he says, I have some no jokes going outdoors. Tips or things to know for the variety. By the way, as a silly experiment, I am trying to epsilere one of them to a wire fence. Tie it up to the fence, I'm imagining. Oh, okay. Brandon was upside down here real quick. Brandon's back. Do you want to finish your thought there and then I can get into his question? Or
I
do you
think we
remember where we were?
I think we covered it pretty good.
Okay.
I was just gonna segue into another 40-minute story about something stupid. So yeah, let's move on.
I love you, man. Okay. So this person is asking about No Joke Outdoors. Yes, No Joke has been grown outdoors. Brandon grew it outdoors himself. John's another person who has grown it outdoors. I know Chonky Nugs in chat right now is growing it outdoors as well. It's got a really freaking beautiful garden patch going.
Nice.
Things to know. I would probably suggest support. If the branches get long, the buds will get heavy. Some sort of support is typically good for those. Um, I didn't, I mean, actually, Brandon's grown it outdoors more than I have. I have not grown it myself. But feeding was kind of typical for you. Watering was kind of typical. Again, John is in kind of the middle of the country. He experienced 100-degree heat regularly, survived through it. You're in the Pacific Northwest. I doubt you had the same
Fungal
weather.
pathogen
So,
pressures, tons of like I lost an entire greenhouse that was covered to fungal pathogens. Um,
oy.
the no joke, I I lost maybe let's say like a 7 foot tall, perfect Christmas tree. Um, I got over 2 pounds off that plant, and I lost maybe a quarter sack to
Oh,
mold, and
wow.
I lost everything else. The Pacific Northwest is brutal for outdoor. It's kind of just a game I like to play as a self-flagellation experiment. And
It is. It really
yeah,
is.
yeah. See what but easy to feed, easy to water, very typical. I did not do any training on it. And so I did get some, just full that July and August weather out here is as good as it gets for growing. And so just an
Yeah.
enormous plant, giant buds, some of my favorite hash from the past couple of years, just
Eh,
unreal hash. And then you're gonna have to tie it up. I think that if you could if I had it to do over with those from last year, because I had, like they said something about a fence. I had ropes
mhm.
coming off of a fence trying to support it. But if
Okay.
you could just put like 4 stakes, kind of surround it, and then put trellis on it every couple of feet, every 3 feet, it would be fine. You wouldn't have to do anything else. But yeah, very
Cool.
impressed with that plant, man.
Cool. Thank you. I am stoked. I would love to run it outdoors myself, but we both live in the same area. You just have you're a glutton for punishment, so
Yeah.
you can take it. I'm
It
surprised
beats
it
the
turned out.
odds. It beats the odds. It really, because I mean, I ran 70 cultivars and they all ate it. I had a big windstorm. We get those huge storms out on the
Yeah.
islands. Huge windstorm came, whipped the top off, everything got wet. And these were plants that had been treated with Bacillus subtilis, drenches and foliars, the
Okay.
whole, once a week, the entire veg period. Plants treated with trichoderma, uh, foliars with oils, just doing all the things. The ag sil, doing all the
Preventative.
things.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything to the no joke, and it's the only one that I kept. So it's a very hardy outdoor plant.
Heck
It
yeah.
gets it gets the
Thank you,
Wookiee stamp of approval.
yes, the dread stamp. And again, thank you for running it and thank you for putting it through those paces because again, I love different growers because they all grow differently. And Ed Tech, he's been a huge help with testing in the past too, and he's got some outside right now too. So he's chiming in, he's saying heavy bud. So yeah,
Yeah.
reinforcing, just make sure you kind of stake it up. give it some support, and it will focus most of its energy on bud growth instead of trying to build some cell walls. Um, and actually, speaking of Chunky, speak of the, I don't want to call him a devil because he's awesome, but he did have a question. So we'll sneak his question in here. He says, I am going to top dress after the show. Should I add biochar to my mix? Now, two questions here. Is biochar a standalone ingredient you can add? And then, secondly, is there a nutrient benefit to it, or is it more of a hotel for microbes? Can it be both?
Yeah, so I think of it more for water retention, water holding capabilities, and condos for microbes.
Okay.
That's where I think of it. And because of that, I don't top dress if I add biochar. I want to work it down into the soil, into the rhizosphere, because that's where I want that water holding. That's where I want my microbes to be supported the most. And so I want to work it down into the soil. So I would skip the biochar right now.
Okay.
Um, I only add biochar up to like 6-8% at the most usually, and I only do it like every 8 to 10 rounds. It's something that's going to stay, it's going to sit there. It's not going to be absorbed by your plant, so it's going to stay there. So it's not something you have to apply over and over and over again. Um, as far as the um, the amendments, we want to scratch them in as deeply as we can without disturbing the plant, just so the biology has a chance to get to it. If you wanted to use something, like that will help with the uptake, then I would add, a teaspoon per plant of some humic or fulvic and just water that in. Um, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Good answer there, because that's going to help him again. Probably not something he needs to do now, but I know he does reuse soil. I know he amends soil. It sounds like that's going to be the right time to
I
add the
I love
biochar in the
yeah,
mix.
I love biochar, but when and I would use it here in the Pacific Northwest where we obviously don't need it for any water holding. But um if I was in LA or Vegas or
Mhm.
I would definitely have it. Definitely.
Okay.
Because that way you're not
Here's
watering 2 and 3 times a day. Once will do it.
Yeah, and when you're watering a lot outside too, that is a cost. So especially at a commercial level.
Yeah.
Couple quick rapid fire questions here. One, Adam Davidson, always good to see. He grew a killer, no joke, indoors. He says pros
Nice.
and cons to a living mulch or a straw better, and I will just quick answer that one and say there is a lot of discussion about cover crops over on the KIS Organics YouTube channel. Definitely check that out. We kind of, like indoors, we're not really subscribing to it. There's a lot of reasons why. They explain them all in depth because a lot of people talk about it, especially with organic growing. Now, outdoors, different story, different ball of wax. I think it's a plus. You don't want to leave soil and fields fallow. But we're talking cannabis here. And for home grow, yeah, I mean, indoor, usually not. Outdoor, you can consider it. But check out the conversation on the KISS Organics YouTube channel because I know they go into that one a lot. And then another one from Thomas here. I thought it was pretty quick or pretty cool. He says, question, have y'all done DNA tests? I'm pretty sure y'all brothers, because we do get that one a lot as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's way worse or way better when I've got my beard.
yeah. And another one here too, kind of rapid fire from Jeff. Jeff says, question, make changes gradually or suddenly, e.g. flip and temperature. So sounds kind of more like environmental ones. When it comes to the flip, my photo period, my light hours, that I do hard stop. But anything else I kind of like to do gradually or sudden or not suddenly, as you put it. Um, how about yourself, Brandon? Are there any specific things that you may do gradually or anything you may do suddenly in the grow room?
So I'm the same, as far as flip, that's a hard stop, 100%. I don't ease into that. I go from, 18 or 24 straight to 12, 12. Um, at that, Otherwise, well, and lights too. I'm pretty aggressive with lights. I know a lot of people like to ramp their lights up. I'm
Mm,
after like day two, I'm pretty much full bore. I'm gonna weed out the weaklings, and they're not gonna make it. Now I will say with really high par, we do see magnesium deficiencies showing up. That's the central element in the chlorophyll molecule. So there's just a big demand with really high par output with young plants, and so that could be a good visual to back off your light a little bit. But aside from that, I do like to ramp environmentals, and so like I'll CO2, I like to take that down with about 3 weeks to go back down to ambient. But I guess that's a pretty hard stop because I'm going from like 12 to 450, you know, I'm going back to ambient. Temperature is one that I'll ramp up and down, but yeah, I guess if I'm thinking about it, I do most stuff kind of abruptly. Cannabis can
uh,
take it. Cannabis can
yeah.
take it. Like it's such a cool plant for so many reasons, but man, it's neat to grow because it can take it. It's amazing plant.
It really is amazing what it can actually take when it's healthy, when
Tolerant.
it's well fed, and it has its nutrients. That's probably one of my biggest takeaways from working commercially. They would ask me to do some things to plants where I'm like, "You're crazy." 2 days later, never could even tell. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, I
Yeah.
guess you can rock this one like that."
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see here. Randy Watson had a question here, and this is kind of pulling us back towards balance in the soil and some ionic properties. But he says, question: if I added too much dolomite lime and I'm getting deficiencies, should I add oyster shell or go for liquid calcium? Um, Top of my head, it sounds like one's going to be more immediate, whereas the other is going to have to wait a little bit. So, what are your thoughts here? Because you're better equipped to answer this than myself.
Top of my head, the first thing that goes off is pH. So a lot of times
Okay.
when folks are adding dolomite lime, they are looking to raise their pH. If they're not looking to, they're gonna, so I hope they are. Um, so if you've already raised your pH, I wouldn't want to add any kind of free calcium. So I would avoid oyster shell, possibly a liquid calcium. I'd have to know what product it was. I would use micronized gypsum, Diamond K. It's essentially water soluble. You could mix up your application rate.
Uh-oh. We're losing Brandon again. But another thing that Brandon talks about a lot, we said death is in the dose earlier. Availability is in the size. And so when he's talking about adding this in, something that is just already very granular, or well, powder. Not, yeah, powder is what you kind of want. You don't necessarily want big chunks. A lot of times that's the form that you find it in at the store. But if you could get that gypsum, just nice powder, it's probably going to work best to water in to have the desired result, kind of based off of what Brandon was saying there. And again, guys, I'm not going to bullshit anybody. He's better equipped to answer that question than myself. So I will leave that one there. Hopefully, he did kind of hit on that for you or give you a way to go. I'll keep this queued up here, but there was another easy one for me in here, kind of specifically about breeding in plants that I could probably answer. T-Man, he says, question, how would you go about doing a seed hunt in 1 gallons? I have an idea of how to go about it, but I'm more curious about how often to top dress and feed with liquid fish or something similar. You're going to be feeding fairly regularly. Typically, I do if I'm trying to do 20. Just as an early pheno hunt or an early test, I do like to do about 21 gallons. You are constantly watering that. You are constantly feeding it, something that I am incorporating into this next pheno hunt because I'm going to be going through the varieties I brought back from Mexico, or came back from Mexico, from the Yucatan. I'm going to be using the auto pot, the tray to grow. So that's going to prevent me. Oh, I see Brandon. That's going to prevent me from having to water like multiple times a day in those 1 gallons when they really start kicking off. Top dressing, if you are doing that, start early. I would do it weekly, I would say, in that size of a container. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Hopefully, I answered that question real quick without cutting Brandon off because
Yeah, I'm
we were
sorry,
on
man.
Randy's question.
Every time I get a
Oh
phone
yeah,
call, it kicks me out. But yeah,
yeah,
so I would add gypsum because that's going to bring in calcium and not raise your pH. So that would be my go-to, hands down, because the oyster shell's definitely going to bump your pH. The liquid calcium definitely could. I have to know what the product is, but yeah. So I would stick to gypsum for that. And
cool.
I would,
And
I would want to see your deficiency symptoms. I would want to make sure that what we're looking at is a calcium deficiency.
okay, here's one that's kind of almost been repeating lately for me. I keep getting asking. I don't know if Doug Lee is still in chat. He was asking this the other day, and then I see EdTech around. He says, "Is milk good for the soil?" And Doug's question is like, "Is it good to spray milk on the plants?" And in my mind, and kind of how I answered him, I'm like, this is the where it yes and no. There's a constituent of milk that we're after here, but milk itself may not be the answer. You're smiling though, so I'll let you take that away.
No, no, you just did it. You just answered it.
Okay.
So what we're looking for is the lactobacillus. It's a very
Labs.
aggressive, very productive biology that we can add to our soil. One of his exudates is oxalase, which drives trichome density and terpene expression, and it will eat your fusarium, your botrytis, so it's a win-win. I know organic growers who just take milk and pour it in their beds. Um, I don't think it's not gonna hurt anything.
Right.
Um, it could potentially, I don't know if you poured out a ton of milk, would it draw bugs? Would it draw, I don't know.
Might not
But
smell
so
good
I
either, too, on a hot day.
might not smell great. Yeah. But I lactobacillus lab is so
Yeah.
easy to make and virtually, almost for free because you could eat the rice later, you could just get some water out of the tap. Chris Trump has some really good videos on how to make it. There's a lot of people that do, but just, KNF is cool. I dig it. Um, it's got issues inside sometimes, but yeah, but I dig it.
It's got some smell issues sometimes, but no, that's a good one to use because again, that's usually something most people have availability to. So if you don't have
Yeah.
availability to
And it's
certain
cheap.
things, or you're trying to avoid, yeah, you're trying to avoid the gnarly stuff, give it a shot, give it a whirl.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
let's see here, and this is kind of a concoction. I'm not sure if this is a full question, but I'll read it from Andy. Andy's always supporting. He says, "Could you use Epsom salts for magnesium and sulfur, and molasses for nutrient availability?" And then he goes on. So let's just handle the first two questions. So Epsom salt, is it
Yep.
good for magnesium and
Yep.
sulfur? Okay.
Yep. It's
Is
it's
it
magnesium sulfate. It's magnesium
okay?
sulfate. And so that's exactly what it is. Magnesium and sulfur. The oxygen's gonna go to water or off gases oxygen. And so it's highly reactive most of the time, and so it's almost immediately available. And it's another reason I like sulfates, calcium and sulfur, gypsum, magnesium and sulfur, Epsom, is because they counterbalance each other with pH. Calcium's up, sulfur's down. Magnesium's up, sulfur's down. And so they don't really screw with your pH, which is really nice for us. So that's a great, yeah. So definitely you could use Epsom and magnesium for sulfur. Molasses for nutrient availability. Molasses is a food source for biology, and so used in great moderation, it is something that you could add to your soil. I see folks overdoing it and creating this kind of weird, mucky mess that draws roaches and ants.
I've used, yes.
But yeah, but in small quantities, just like poured into, put a little bit into solution, a couple tablespoons into a 5 gallon bucket. That can make your microbes happy. And then bone meal for phosphorus. Bone meal is great for phosphorus. Fish bone meal and bone meal, or and then soft rock. Those are the three products that I usually try to advise folks to use. The soft rock is going to become available very slowly. And so getting
Mhm.
some bone or some fish bone in is good. Fish bone arguably may be more bioactive. I don't know for sure, but
Hmm.
that seems to be the where the data is pointing. We have moved over in our recommendations to bone meal for 90% of our facilities because the fish bone meal tests dirtier with heavy metals. So that's why we've made this switch over to, porcine, bovine, equine,
Right.
eggshells for calcium. Um, that's you. So
Availability is
yeah, you
always
can
my top
roast.
of my mind.
Yeah. So like you can do that. You can do the roasting in the vinegar and all that kind of stuff. Um, just get some gypsum. Just get some gypsum for calcium. Like my mom, my parents were heads. My mom used to have eggshells in every single plant in the house, and those eggshells are still sitting there 57 years later. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, you're much better off doing that. Potassium sulfate, another sulfate. It's almost immediately available. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
and then
Cool. Well, thanks
beneficial.
for. Oh, sorry. Finish. Go ahead.
Oh, no, no, I was just reading that. I'm old and I can't really read that. Microorganisms.
Microorganisms, I'm assuming. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but no,
yeah.
yeah, you hit them all there, and I do appreciate that. And yeah, the eggshells, multiple ways of doing it. The Chris Trump, the WCA, you cook off that inner layer, you put it in the vinegar. Hard to measure, but like you just suggested as well, is there's an alternative, and a lot of times there's easier alternatives. I find with a lot of the KNF, the Jadam stuff, is it can be done, but I don't necessarily
It's
have the
all.
time for that. I don't have the time
Yeah,
for it.
when yeah, I'm like IMO what? IMO 12? Like how about what are you doing to it now? And like the
Yeah,
active ingredient in IMO 42 is still lactobacillus. So just make the labs and skip all the IMOs. Yeah, that is one of the problems with KNF is that it can become an entire career unto itself. And I've already got 3 or 4 jobs. I don't have time to do
yeah,
all that kind of stuff. So
that's
but
where
again,
I'm
I dig
at.
it.
That's
But I'm gonna use gypsum if I need calcium.
Yeah, if the power grid goes down, you'll see me switching to KNF pretty quickly. But until then,
Yeah,
I'm rocking with the KIS Organics because it's keeping it simple.
right, right, right.
All right, so I guess I just had one more question starred here, which is good. We're a little bit over. I'm sorry, but Randy was asking: is 60% relative humidity okay indoors during flower? If VPD and airflow are still good, high summer temps and relative humidity right now? I typically say yes because you've mentioned that your airflow is good. The VPD is on point. 60%, sure, it'd be great if we could get it lower, but living in Pacific Northwest, that is like a good humidity for me, particularly with the lights out. So I'm happy with that. And again, I know there's, step down drying is there's more science behind it, more supporting it. But for the longest time, we've known 60 and 60 is kind of how you dry or cure. And if it's too wet to
Yeah.
dry in, then or if it's okay to dry in, why would it not be okay to grow in? So that's my personal thought on that one. I don't know if you have anything to add
I
to
would,
that, or if you want
no,
to tell me I'm crazy.
I would say no. Two things. I 100% agree. And as your temperature goes up, he said, if the VPD is still good. So as the temperature goes up, you can let your humidity go up.
Yep.
And so I'm sure if you've got high summer temperatures and you're 60% relative humidity, you should be fine. But the other thing I want to say about it is I was just having this conversation with my buddy Jeffrey, and we were talking VPD, and he's like, "Where do you want my VPD?" And I was like, "VPD's for two things. The name of the game is evapotranspiration. That's how we grow plants. That's how you turn that's the knob you want to turn. All these other levers are
11.
so that we can turn that knob to 11." And so yeah, 11 and rip it off. And then so you want your VPD set so that you're driving your transpiration as hard as you can, within the reasonable confines of your room, your setup. And then the other side of it is for pest and pathogen, and so, or for pathogen, I'm sorry, and so for IPM. And so, if our VPD gets off, we could end up getting a fungal pathogen. And so that's why people tend to try to stay to the drier side of it. Justin McGill from Mako Farms calls it swamp tech. He had 75% relative humidity in a 88, 90-degree room, and all his PM
Wow.
disappeared. And he was like, "What happened?" And
Wow.
and so yeah, so VPD is really interesting, but just keep in mind there's two things we're trying to do there. We're trying to keep from getting pathogens. We're also trying to drive transpiration. I'm gonna tell on a grow. There's a grow here in Washington State that Tad and I visited, and I was in one of the grow rooms, and I've talked about this before, like shivering. I was shaking. I was so cold. And I turned to the grower and I was like, "What's the temp in here?" And he kind of just shook his head. And the head guy like grabbed me by my arm, took me out in the hallway to proudly display his VPD chart, and he was like 60 degrees, and and wherever he
Oh
had the relative
no.
humidity. And I was like, okay, well, you're not going to get fungal pathogens, but you're also not going to get a pound of weed out of this room. I'm like, there's always another layer to it. And so
Yeah.
you want to start with your leaf temp. Where do you want your leaf temp? That has something to do with CO2 and par as well. And
Mhm.
so like, I get a lot of slack and emails like, "It depends, it depends, it depends." And I'm like, well, it is a nuanced answer to a simple question. And but because there are I love Dr. Ben is always talking about there's always another covariable. And so none of this
Mhm.
happens
Yeah.
in a vacuum. It's an open system. You flip one lever, a bunch of other ones are going to turn too. So, yeah, so you're fine.
Yeah, that's a great point and a great one to kind of end it on because we want people to come back next Tuesday. It's always on the KIS Organics YouTube channel every Tuesday, 2 p.m. And then once a month over here on the Chad Westport YouTube channel, usually the second Tuesday of every month. Um, but yeah, you really mentioned something super important because a lot of times we will hear something or we'll watch a video about one particular fact or one particular factor, and we're like, oh, well, we have to do that because it does this. But that's the beauty of learning the grow game, man. Everything is connected,
Yeah.
everything is related, things that you're not even aware of, things that general science isn't even aware of at this moment. But we will be, and it will be too. So yeah, keep watching,
It's
man,
it's
because
all nuanced. It's all
yeah.
nuanced. Put your critical thinking, the calcium thing. We're talking about trying to hit sufficiency. We got to talk about pH too. Then we want to talk about pH. Now we got to talk about
Yeah.
alkalinity. Now we got to look at your water test. Just the more it's this and yoga are the only two things I've ever done that the better I get at it, the harder it gets, and it's just
Right.
like you learn more and you learn more. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, there's so much more to learn, and so it's awesome. It's organics and a curious brain is peanut butter and jelly. It's perfect.
It's fun, it's never ending, but it could be as simple as you want it to be. And a lot of times
Yep.
that's what we discover after, fucking around and finding out with a bunch of things. It's like, it's actually kind
Yeah.
of really simple. It didn't have to do all that. So, all right. But
Yeah.
Brandon, yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
Dude,
We'll
thank
see
you.
you next week. Yeah, chat. You guys, thanks for hanging
Yeah.
out. Thank you for being so freaking cool. Thank you for being helpful with each other. But most of all, thank you for your questions, 'cause that drives the show. So
Yeah.
yeah, until the next time. Peace out. Oh,
Smoke 'em if
I,
you
I
got
guess I
'em.
should say any last words, I guess, now that I've like told everybody we're leaving. Any last words? I'm
Yeah.
gonna be
Epishield.
yep. Let me blow you up here again. There you go. So
So Epishield at KIS, we're now offering a lot of folks know that we sell soil, but we also sell lights, grassroots beds, all kinds of IPM products, amendments, that kind of stuff. And then I'll plug our conference, which is actually starting to fill up quite nicely now. In the first
nice.
weekend of September out in Montana, I'll be joining Tad, Dr. Ben, Suzanne Wainwright Evans, the Bug Lady. Dr. Nadia, Dr. Greenhouse, definitely one of the leading environmental experts. Dr. Michael Brownbridge from Bioworks, one of my favorite folks. There's going to be some heavy hitters out there, and it's a science data based organic cannabis convention conference, and so looking forward to that. So hope to see some folks out there.
Yep. Badass. I may or may not be there. We're trying to work it out. But I want to let everybody know too, if you are along the Washington coast this weekend in Tokeland, they are having their Toke Fest. Second annual Toke Fest, even though it's their third one. This Saturday, I'm going to be out there speaking, talking a little bit about home grow. There's going to be an activist speaker and another medical patient. The third person prescribed legal cannabis from the federal government will be speaking there as well. So that's where you can catch me next and catch all the fun stuff. Thanks, guys, for hanging out. We'll see you later. Peace.